Welcome to Bloomberg Law. I'm Pacchia. Sexual assault charges against former International Monetary Fund chief Dominique Strauss-Kahn were dismissed by New York prosecutors earlier this week. Joining me now to discuss is former sex crime prosecutor Elizabeth Kase. She's a partner at Kase Druker. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee. It's great to be here.
So earlier this week, charges were dropped against Dominique Strauss-Kahn. What happened?
Well, a lot of things happened in this case. Basically, from the get-go, this case had several problems. First and foremost, the DA's office was under the gun of time. When the allegations against Dominique Strauss-Kahn, we're going to call him DSK,
we can call him DSK
if that's
from
okay.
here on in.
Great. Were alleged back in May 14th of 2011. He was already on a plane heading back to France when the police got the call that a sexual assault had taken place. The police had to act quickly to get him off the plane. And the police work was actually quite astounding when you think about all of the circumstances that were involved in getting somebody off a plane as quickly as they did. Mm-hmm. But when they arrested him, and that was a formal arrest, the DA's office had a very limited amount of time, according to criminal procedure law of New York, to actually bring the case in for indictment because bail was set. Under CPL 18080, the DA only has 6 days or 144 hours to have a case presented to the grand jury and filed to keep a defendant in custody. Now, obviously, that was a paramount issue for the district attorney's office, or they wouldn't have seized him as quickly as they did on the airplane. Once they seized him, the process began to unfold. And Dominique Strauss-Kahn, DSK, exercised his right to remain silent. So the only thing that the DA had in this case was the victim's story going forward. They had a choice. They could have taken a chance and released Dominique Strauss-Kahn prior to indicting him to do further investigation, or they could have run the case into the grand jury as quickly as they did on the victim's word. They did that, and that created the situation that we're in. Very soon after the indictment was filed, the defense team issued a letter to the press and to the district attorney's office notifying them that the victim in the case had severe credibility problems. That created a whole media circus, in a sense, and that, I think, is what created the impetus for the district attorney to really fully investigate and analyze this case in particular as quickly as they did to create the result that happened.
Now, the dissemination of the credibility issues involving the complaining witness. Was that what made this case in and of itself unusual, or is it the media treatment of this case that made it so unusual? A lot of attention has been given to it, and I'm wondering if it's mainly a factor of just the person who was brought in as a defendant.
It's a confluence of circumstances. Definitely it has a lot to do with the fame and notoriety of the defendant in this case. He's an international person. He controls markets, currencies, and politics in France. And certainly the world was watching. And he was going to run for president. So the whole world was watching whether or not this person would be guilty of the actual allegations. But aside from that, the actual credibility issues that the defense team alluded to aren't a per se issue or indication that the DA would drop the case or that this would become a media sensation. It was all of the things put together. Victims have credibility problems.
Right.
Prosecutors don't go out and hunt for victims.
Right.
Victims come to the office with whatever problems they may have experienced, and the DA has to investigate those allegations and those charges.
Right. Now, as we said before, you've worked on a lot of sex crime cases in your previous life.
I have, right. I was an ADA in Manhattan.
Right. How often does it come to be that someone is charged and then the complaining witness has credibility issues and then the charges are dropped? Is this something that happens all the time, or is it unique?
I wouldn't say that it happens all the time, but I don't think it is at all unique. Prosecutors have their work cut out for them when there is a sex crimes case put before them. Because of the nature of the case, it's an act that takes place normally without witnesses. It's usually a he said, she said kind of a matter. They already have problems because it is a credibility case from the get-go. Is she or he telling the truth? What kind of alibi does the defendant have? Is there DNA evidence that supports or substantiates the allegations? And without all of those other factors combining, the person's actual credibility is very much in focus in a sex crimes case. Now imagine you are charged with a case like DSK was. Your entire reputation and your life life as you know it will never be the same. So DAs take those cases very seriously. And that's what I was saying earlier. Had he not been getting on that plane, I believe that a lot of the investigation about this person's credibility would have been front-ended in this case. So they may have been able to delay the arrest and the prosecution of DSK if DSK wasn't a flight risk, if he wasn't an international famed person. They would have had an opportunity to see him before the court system at a later time. But because of the circumstances, they had to rush to judgment on the case. And that made her credibility issues so much more important as the case unraveled. They presented the case for indictment prior to doing a full-scale investigation. Had they done all of their research with all of the resources available to them, they probably would not have gone into the grand jury as quickly or on the charges that they eventually did.
Right. The prosecutors seem to be taking a fair amount of blame for the way this episode turned out. I'm guessing that's not necessarily fair.
It is not fair. In fact, I believe that the prosecutor in this case acted with the information that they had with great speed, considering the importance of the case and the importance of the allegations. They took all of the suggestions of the defense team very seriously and conducted further investigations, it would appear. And that is why they came to the conclusion that they had to dismiss the case in the interest of justice because they could not prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. A prosecutor, by law, has this paramount discretion. And they are not representatives or zealous advocates for victims. They take the victim's story and the crimes that are charged very seriously, and they champion those rights and issues relating to the victims that they help. But ultimately, they are the purveyors of fairness and justice in our society. That is the definition of a prosecutor. They must be cognizant of their discretion. And in this case, Cy Vance used appropriate discretion to dismiss the charges before there was ever even a trial or a jury hearing it.
So the charges have been dismissed, but there's also a civil case out there from the complaining witness, or there's about to be. How do you expect that to proceed?
Well, the civil case is already tarnished and damaged.
Because of the issues of credibility, will they be central in the civil case going forward?
They absolutely will. They have always been critical and central in this matter. And now it's even more under the microscope. The fact that the district attorney's office outlined in a memo that was made public, that was reiterated on the record in front of Judge Obis, there is essentially a record of her inability to tell the truth.
Right.
And so now any allegation that she brings forth, whether it's in a civil context or a criminal context, will always be under the microscope and cause for speculation. And that's a very unfair thing to have happen to a victim, an alleged victim of a sex crime. But she, in a sense, created that problem for herself when she went public, when she outed herself to the society, when she had her own press conferences, when she brought the civil case during the infancy of the criminal case. She had plenty of time under the statute of limitations to bring that civil case. She rushed the gun.
Why do you think she did that?
Again, I think it was for her own, well, let me take a step back. I cannot begin to get into the mind of somebody who's allegedly been a victim of a sex crime. There is a lot, with my experience as a sex crimes prosecutor, I know that there are a lot of mental and emotional components to being a victim of any crime, but especially a sex crime. Some women go to the streets because they feel that it's part of their healing, that they be identified, that they be noticed, that they be counted, that they be heard. And perhaps if they believe that the DA's office is not doing enough to support their emotional needs, and the DA's office, by the way, should be very separated from a victim's emotional needs. They should be seeking counseling for those issues because they have a job to do that is supposed to be without emotion. Perhaps she went to the streets and did all of those things and forced the civil action to get more notoriety for herself, perhaps to heal herself. But certainly they could have waited until the outcome of the criminal case before bringing any civil charges. And I would assume that the district attorney's office would have hoped, although they cannot control a victim's personality or a victim's press conference seeking or any of those things that she did to bring attention to herself, they could try to dissuade her because it certainly had a negative impact on their case, but they cannot control what she does.
Now, from the DA's vantage point, do you expect this incident to impact sex crime investigations in New York City going forward?
I absolutely do not. I think that, if anything, this is a lesson to the public that if you are a victim of a case and you bring the police or law enforcement into your life, you have to understand that your life is going to be scrutinized and you have the absolute obligation to tell the truth. If you don't, it doesn't benefit your case and it doesn't benefit the prosecution. Had she been forthright and truthful in the origination of this case, there could have been a very different outcome.
All right.
Remember, we get the victims as we find them. So if she had come in with flaws and blemishes, that didn't mean that her case wasn't prosecutable, I should say.
I see. Liz, we're going to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Lee. It was a pleasure.
That's Liz Kase from Kase Druker. If you'd like to learn more about the issues we just discussed, go check out the Bloomberg Law Litigation Report. It's available on BloombergLaw.com, and it's also available on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching.